Hello there, and welcome to the fourth in our films on painless personal statement writing. We have been talking about how to write your personal statement in some easy steps. The last film we did, which you'll find on our YouTube channel, was about taking all the information that you think you might want to include on your personal statement and then asking yourself the question, so what? What do all these wonderful things say about you? And how do they relate to what the universities are looking for? So if you haven't done that already, go back, listen to that other video and have a little scribble down of all the ideas you might have. And then at this point, what we're going to do now is take all that massive amount of information you've generated and start refining it, trimming it, editing it down. So it's beginning to get into shape and into the size of statement that you need. I didn't introduce myself earlier, but I will do now. I'm Melissa Mehta, and I help people prepare for their university interviews, often at Oxford and Cambridge. And my colleague on the call is Liz Reece, who has many years' experience helping people write their personal statements, amongst other things. And she's going to talk us through today how to start refining your personal statement. So Liz, what do we do first?
Oh, well, hello, everyone. Hopefully you've got this lovely list now of things you've done and experiences in your life and your learning and your reading, and you've reflected on what it's meant to you. I would add that it's not necessarily a linear process, this. You will find yourself going back and forth a bit. Your memory will bring things up that it didn't bring up in your first listing. So don't worry, that things will hopefully keep developing. But what I want to do today is give you 4 headings. These 4 headings would be where you can start moving your material so that you have some kind of structure. Please don't think that this is rigid, it isn't. But what you've got to bear in mind is these university admissions tutors are looking for students who are highly motivated, engaged, and have relevant skills, whatever the subject that you're applying for. So with that in mind, they are also particularly looking for your academic ability, and you need to have a balance in your statement that shows at least 3/4 of academic interest and around 1/4, perhaps 20%, that is not directly related. Now, we may have mentioned that before, but if you haven't heard it, now you have. It's about 75-25 or 80-20 if you're going for a highly selective course. Let's look at some headings.
Sorry to interrupt you. It's also just worth clarifying, because this was something that I hadn't fully appreciated until you explained it, that academic majority of the information might also be course related in a wider sense. So for medicine, it might be to do with your work experience in an old people's home. So that might not look like an academic related example, but it's related to your course that you want to study if you want to read medicine.
Thank you, yeah. And indeed, if it's something that is career related, it could be business, it could be engineering, there could be really relevant interests or work experiences that you've had that would definitely be related in that top 3/4, let's say. Okay. One other thing to remind you, if you've used all 5 choices on your application form, this statement does need to relate to all of those. The exceptions would be something like medicine, where you're only allowed to, or veterinary or dentistry, where you're only allowed 4 of the choices to be directly related, and you have 1 that's presumably a safe backup. The backup doesn't need to be reflected directly in your statement, because you're going to be going for those very competitive courses. But in general, your statement has to be relevant to your 5 choices. Okay. Now, this structure does not mean that you have to write everything in the exact order that I'm telling you, but you need to end up with this. And sometimes I tell my students that it's actually better to leave the beginning until the end of the process, because that's where you might actually find some more inspiration. But you do want to have on your statement a starting point that shows where you were motivated. So let's call it motivation. What motivated you to choose this course? Is there an experience that you can talk about that was relevant, or some reading you did that really brought some ideas together? Does it relate to your current school subjects? How? Or is there something about you and your experiences in life that have really triggered an interest in this subject? So start your writing with, even if it's not the first place you actually write, something about your motivation for this course. The admissions tutor needs to read that you are directly interested in what they're offering. What you don't want there is lots and lots of cliches, and we're going to come on to that in the next video.
So sorry to interrupt you, Liz. So when it really lands with me when you say don't necessarily write this first. It will be at the beginning, but it won't necessarily be the thing that you write down first. And it's like it's almost like finding your personal mission behind wanting to read this subject. And my suggestion for one of the ways you could work out what that might be is when you go through your great long list of experiences and things that you've done that might be relevant. It's a thing that when you read it out loud, it kind of, I don't know, gives you goosebumps or makes you feel energized. It's something that very viscerally motivates you and was maybe a key kind of turning point. We thought, actually, yes, this is the subject for me.
I've got a lovely example of that, actually. I was helping a girl quite a few years ago with her statement, and she was applying for economics courses at highly competitive universities. Somewhere in the middle of what she'd written, a fairly good draft, she talked about having, as a child, used the stock exchange with her pocket money. And she thought it was fairly insignificant. But actually, it was what she'd learned from that, and the fact that it really motivated her to learn more about how the whole economic system works, that made it a very good start point. It was both original and engaging and relevant. Okay, that's point one then. You might not start writing it at the beginning, but there needs to be something that comes out about your motivation at the top. Point two. This is really where you need to extend the academic focus or the directly related experiences. And this needs to be a very significant chunk of your statement. Perhaps you want to reflect on your current courses of study. You need to talk about what interests you, what you're learning, and these are the so what factors, and maybe the transferable skills. Use an example here. Don't just list the skills, but perhaps use the example of an essay or an experiment or a maths project, it doesn't matter whichever subjects obviously you're applying for, to bring out the transferable skills. So it could be that you've been doing an extended project. What happened to help you decide on the project? What processes did you go through? What did you learn from this? And how did you bring in a range of data and reading? And this reflection will really help the person reading the statement to see how you work and what interests you. Okay, that's part of the academic, but we've also, as Melissa rightly said, there are other wider experiences that are going to be directly relevant, particularly for career-related courses. So if you've done a work experience, where did you go? What did you learn? Did it teach you something about yourself? Did it teach you something about the style of work or the skills needed and how you're developing them? Did it inspire you to go away and do more reading? So this is a significant chunk that gives you a chance to develop discussion points that show how you relate to the course and what skills you have.
And with this, again, it's interesting maybe to not just think analytically about your list and your so what's. It's also to notice which little anecdote from your work experience really hooks people's interest when you talk to them about it, or maybe the essay that you wrote that you kind of hope people will ask you about because you find it really, really interesting. So it's combining what you've done with your analysis of the so what's with more of an intuitive feeling around it. So the bits that really feel important to you that you can back up in a way that relates to the subject you want to study.
Great, thank you. And don't forget to include aspects of your reading and how they've supported your thinking. Ideally, you won't just be sticking to the books and syllabus. You will actually show that you read beyond the syllabus, because university study is independent study on the whole, and you need to show that that's what you're interested in doing as well. So reading is a good way of showing that. So number one was motivation. Number two was directly related to academic and experiences. Number three is the slightly less relevant experiences. but ones that are also important because they show your personality, your reliability, and your ability to contribute to the university itself. So this might be what you do outside lessons, it might be volunteering, it might be a job. They might not feel directly relevant, but they still show something about you, things you do in your spare time. They could be related, but one thing to warn about, if you're someone who does loads of things in your spare time, don't just put in a list. You need to be selective. You need to prioritize perhaps 2 or 3 areas of your life outside the classroom and think about what those mean to you. And if you can make them relevant to the course, then so much the better. This is also the place to include any work experience that you might have undertaken and what you've learned maybe about the workplace or yourself in there. So that's section 3. For those of you taking a gap year, this is where you need to make mention of your plans. It's fine to take a gap year, although it's not always favoured in the maths and science courses, so you need to check that out with admissions tutors. But it's very important here just to make mention of what you might be doing, whether it's working, travelling, volunteering, those sorts of things. Do check this out with admissions tutors if you're a little unsure whether a gap year is a good idea, but you ought to make mention here in your statement. I'm moving on now to the very last section, section 4, which is your summary. This is not where you say, I am the best person for you, so choose me. Please don't do that. Keep it fairly low key. You might want to link this back to the beginning. If there was something you said you wanted to learn more about, you just say, I look forward to learning more about these things or developing my skills in these areas. It really only needs to be a sentence, but make sure that you round off the statement with something that summarizes you are interested in this course. Don't just leave it in midair.
Yeah. So no big finale that's singing and dancing, but
no.
round off neatly.
Okay, so those are my 4 tips for helping you with the structure. There are different ways of doing this. You might feel that you want to use bits of paper where you've got all your different aspects of your lists written out and you move them around. Perhaps you have them all on the floor. Some people love that physical tactile thing. A lot of people obviously will work on a computer, and it may be that at this stage your list is still a list with lots of short points, but you could hopefully start to move these together to make paragraphs that actually say something meaningful and have links together. One other thing that a lot of my students find really difficult is to note that this is not quite the same as an academic essay. Not every paragraph will link together. You don't have to make each paragraph flow together like you might an essay. There's often a slightly disjointed feeling between the academic section and the extracurricular section, but you don't actually need to introduce each section.
One thing that I wish I'd known when I was writing my personal statement was that the actual process of drafting and editing it's not just a data manipulation exercise. It may generate new data in itself, and by that I mean you may have realizations about yourself and your motivations while doing this, and that might mean you've even got to this point in the process and you think, actually, you know what, I need to go back a few steps and redo it because I've realized something. And that's not a bad thing at all. That's great, because it means you're going down an extra layer of depth into your motivation. So don't worry if this is an iterative process and it looks a bit messy. You'll get there in the end.
I think I would add that's a very good point. I've obviously worked with a wide range of students, and some of them aren't quite sure which course they're applying for. So I encourage them to write 2 statements, because exactly the process that you're describing, Melissa, is part of the journey. It's part of the self-discovery. It's a very valuable process, this, although it's painful. Don't be surprised if you take 10 drafts or more. This is not going to happen all at once. What we're saying is very simplified.
So hopefully that gives you a few pointers to get you going on the next stage of your draft. Stick with us. We are going to take you all the way to the end. And in our next film, we'll talk about how to refine further, neaten everything up, and get you to where you want to be with your personal statement.